either a fun memory or a serious one?
No, you was good, I'm just.
Lorna, do you
Well,
want
yes, because I sat in the seat, what would you say, back in 2020 that we did this, so I
Yeah.
don't want to repeat myself. But I,
No one will remember what you said 3 years ago, let alone 3 weeks ago, right?
the memory goes first.
Okay.
Where's your megaphone? She's
Oh,
got it.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
look at that.
Right here,
Oh, yeah.
but I never needed one, because my maiden name was Mitchell, and the Mitchells could always be heard, so. But,
You and all your brothers.
now, I was Lorna Mitchell, grew up in Appleton Village, but no matter whether you lived in the village or not, if you went out of town, you were known as a ridge runner, right? That was usually how we were known. But, no, I was born, brought up in Appleton, and my home was right across from what is now the Lavender Farm. And back then, of course, it belonged to Joe Moody, and it was a dairy farm. And then we raised hens, laying hens, like 3,600. So I graded eggs every day after school. And I'd get so upset with those hens because they didn't know whether it was a holiday or not. We still had to grade eggs. But I've always had this funny joke now is, because being a dairy farm across from us, Joe Moody's, and now it's a lavender farm, and I said, boy, the smell has changed. That was a good thing. No, I went through all the school systems in Appleton. Started out with this gal right over here. We were starting in kindergarten. There were pictures over here. She lived with her folks down at the corner because her dad helped run the store back when it was Brown and Sproul. Because my grandfather was Brown, her grandfather was Sproul.
Wow.
So we started kindergarten together, and one little side note is we kind of were like best of friends, and our parents would get together all the time. So I lived just up above the Baptist church. I think it was 2 houses up. She was down on the corner. Well, I was about 5 years old, I think. I got upset with my mother, and I looked at my mother and I said, I'm running away. And my mother says, go ahead, I'll pack your bag. So off I go, because back then, you could wander around the town, and you didn't have to worry at all about, being kidnapped and all the things that we have to worry about now. So off I go, and of course I run away to her house. And probably as soon as I got there, her mother was on the line calling my mother saying, hey, Julie, Lorna's down here. So my mother knew where I was. So you couldn't get away with anything. But I think I was telling Scott, we had a talk just this last week. And back then, in growing up, everybody looked out for the kids in town. We had free run. We would go, we'd have pickup games after school. We'd play kick the can, whatever. But no matter where we were, parents were always looking out for the other kids. So, but the other side of that coin was you couldn't get away with anything. No, because they always knew where you were. But to get back to the schools, now I have wonderful memories of schools. It just was wonderful. We didn't have a lot to work with, but our teachers, and it wasn't until I got older that I realized the load that our teachers carried back in those days, because they taught from nature, because we didn't necessarily have science books. Like Mrs. Meservey, she would take us on little trips along the Georges River, down through the woods, and she would teach us about all the lichens, the moss, the Johnny jump ups, everything like that. And that's how we learned from first-hand experience like that. And there were 3 grades in each class. The town office was the school from kindergarten right through to senior. So the lower grades, there were 3 rooms, and each teacher had 3 classes in each room. So I assume that we probably all learned through osmosis, because the teachers were teaching kindergarten right through to first and second grades all in one room. So But finally, when I got to the end of my junior year, that's when they closed Appleton down as a high school, and that's when they started consolidating. So, so they told us, and I think, Donald, weren't we the largest class that had come through?
I think so.
Because we were the baby boomers.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
And we had what, it's like 17, but only 11 of us ended up going to Camden, I
Camden,
think,
yeah.
like that. So, you know, when we were told we were going to Camden High School, we were like, what? Because going from Appleton to Camden was a big cultural shock for us. But we went to Camden, so we were the first class to go to Camden in our senior year, and we graduated in '65. But we went down there and we realized that even though we hadn't had a lot to work with in the school system, most of us held our own down there, and but I know I was delighted to go from, I had taken chemistry in Appleton High School, and I think we had one Bunsen burner and one microscope to work with. Went to Camden in Dual Daly's classroom. Every student had their own station, you know, and they had everything to work with, and I was just in awe of that. But like I said, we had gotten a good background through the Appleton schools, so that we held our own in Camden, and I think some of us maybe surprised ourselves, but it was just it was a good education coming from Appleton and you know, and going on down to Camden. So we have the distinction of being the first class that went to Camden, and then we were the last class of being Camden High
Yes.
School, because the year after we graduated in '65, it became Camden Rockport. So we kind of closed schools down as we were going through. But just one thing I'll end on is, Scott reminded me, he got me thinking the other day, when you go to a small school, you tend to get a lot more opportunities than what you might have at a larger school, as far as being involved and then letting you have the freedom to do things that interest you. I was one of the few people that knew I wanted to be a teacher, probably from 5th grade on. I knew I wanted to be a teacher. It was like instilled within me. So of course, when I got into high school in Appleton, if a teacher in the lower grades had to go to like a funeral in the afternoon or something, be dismissed, I was often chosen to go down and monitor in the classroom for that teacher while she was gone. And I probably was only a freshman or sophomore, junior in high school. And that gave me the experience, and it built confidence, you know, and it made me realize, well, Lorna, that is what you want to do. So I went to UMO and became a teacher, but I only got 3 years in, and then I went into business. But we learned from everything. So anyhow, that's kind of like some of the highlights of my going to Appleton. And Janice has a lot more than I do.
No. One highlight I can remember when I was in the upstairs room in junior and senior year, we'd start school, and I'd look over on Elm Street and I'd see Lorna and her sister reading her brother Gary just coming down to come to school.
Because we had to walk to school.
They were always late. And, another story I like to tell, there was a Mr. McDonald that taught here for a while. And then after that, he was on the border patrol going up through Eustis, that area up there, Cove and Gore. So my cousin Nellie Gushy, she and her husband were going through there one day, and he said, "Where are you from?" And she said, "Appleton." And she said, "Well, you probably knew my brothers, Jason and Joel." He said, yeah, that's why I quit. Anyway, I didn't have any idea when I got out of school what I was gonna do. I become a telephone man after that, but worked for New England Telephone, which became Verizon. But it was a good school to go to, but we had Mr. Braun was here as a teacher when I was a freshman. And he really had me motivated, but they got rid of him. He had had a nervous breakdown before, and somebody found out about it, and they shoot him out of town.
Oh,
And I never really studied as hard after that. And because I owned 5 different cars while I was going through high school, so I took a lot of time off so that I could support my habit.
Yeah, and then a lot of hunting,
Yeah, and time off for hunting in November.
and you could take your gun to school.
Yeah, I'd bring my car to school, leave my gun unlocked with the guns in there, you know. You didn't worry about it, you know, at the time. You know, nobody thought about shooting up a school. You know, it was altogether different. I grew up on a dairy farm, and we had a dairy farm until I was 15, and then my father started working out a lot, and it wound up being 3 floors of laying hens after that. But it was a great place to grow up. And I now live about 300 yards down over the hill from the farm. So anyway, I could probably tell you more about my cousin David working up there. I'll get into that later maybe.
I'm Scott Thatcher. I went to Appleton just the year after the new school was built. You know, the existing school now, but yeah, it had just gotten built. And I have such amazing memories in this town, but specifically in this school. I mean, I raked blueberries for him for a little while. That's how I got introduced. I was 9 years old, and I'm across from the house and raking blueberries in that field. And
Was I a slave driver?
you were nice.
Okay.
At least that's my memory.
Okay, oh, good, yeah.
No, I mean, and we were talking the other day, what I love about Appleton is whether you were blueberry raking or whether you were going to school, the work ethic that you got from this town is something that unfortunately other places don't provide. And it's a small town, and you might think that you couldn't benefit in the way that we did, at least at the time. You know, raking blueberries, you learn so much. You learn about negotiating, right? To try to snag an extra row that has a lot of blueberries up there, right?
Right, oh
You
yeah.
learn about,
yeah. Might not be ethical, but you
well, you work a deal, or you get there early, or
Okay.
you know, you pull a few extra strings, and you know, you're a quarter, half a mile away from the truck, and you want to. And this is back in my day. Nowadays, it's all whatever it is now, but back, yeah, but I mean, but back in the day, like you knew you were going to lose time. You might lose some of the good rows if you spent too much time going back to the truck. So you tried to load the buckets as much as you could, you know, 28, 30 pounds without crushing the berries, and you get back and winnow as quickly as you could, and they get back in the field. And the same is true. And so that work ethic, I mean, the summer that we came up here, I think it was 84. You probably remember. I mean,
Well, it probably could have been 84, that's the year that Dennis and I got married, so.
yeah, so I think that's when it was, and then that summer for a few weeks I raked, but 3 weeks prior to that, we were, just as the school year was winding down, I had Miss Airy was my teacher. She was amazing. And what we talked about the other day is just how amazing all the teachers at Appleton were. When that school was built, it was already too small for the number of students we had at the time. There were 2 trailers out in the parking lot. You know, the buses had to kind of weave by the trailers to pick the students up. And it was too small when it was built. The library at one point, and even some students were out in these trailers in the parking lot. And, but we could all fit in the gym. We could all fit in the gym together for school dances and for, you know, assemblies, etc. But so I started in 3rd grade, and then I was there, and my class was always combined we were I guess we were too small to be individuals, so we were always combined. So it was third and fourth and fifth and so on. Like we were actually, and then we would kind of split up, which was a little unusual in the school at the time. Everybody else was kind of independent. And I guess what I'd like to share, and what I shared with you the other day was, what I loved about Appleton is not just the math and the science and the traditional stuff you learn in a classroom. I did afternoon announcements. Remember, I mean, you work in the office. I mean, nowadays you'd never have that opportunity, but at the time, as a third grader, as a fourth grader, I was allowed to go and get on the microphone with all these people listening and dismiss the classes and say what bus was there, and talk about a confidence builder. Talk about like an ego booster. Like, it was amazing. And I wasn't the most confident kid when I came here because I was from away. And I wasn't accepted completely because I was from away. And, you know, it started, that started to boost my confidence. And then I was able to DJ the dances at the school. And, I mean, at one point, Mr. Philbrook was our principal, I think, and...
Carol the Riviere.
Yeah, yep.
Sternberg did a little stint there filling in.
Yeah, and
then
every
Kress,
single...
and then Russo. That, while I was
So,
there, those
yeah,
were
so
the
I wasn't
five.
there when Kress and Russo were there, but they were still supportive. They still actually let me borrow some equipment to do some DJing. And they still let me, even nowadays you'd never do this, but they let a ninth grader come back and DJ the dances. And again, it was great for me. I mean, I don't know if it would be okay for you to do this nowadays, probably not, you know. But, you know, just like Unlock Guns, I mean, you know, times have changed a little bit, but it was a great confidence booster for me. And what it did for me was, I was on Coast 102.5 at 16 years old, 15 and a half, 16 years old. I had my own FCC license. Well, that's because of Appleton, not because of Camden. Like, not Camden Rockport, it was because of Appleton, because you guys let me be on the microphone before I was on a big microphone, right? And I mean, frankly, it dictated the entire trajectory of my life. If you know, so I was on Coast 102.5. I worked there for a half a decade, in between, you know, after school, after high school, you know, and then also I would even come back from college and I would fill in on Christmas or New Year's, the shifts that nobody else wanted. I was like, sure, sign me up. I just want to be heard. So, and even the college that I chose ended up being a communications school, liberal arts, but communications is what I studied, Emerson College in Boston. And it all can be traced back to being able to do afternoon announcements, or morning announcements / afternoon announcements, dismissals for the bus. And it's the smallest thing. What was great about our teachers is they weren't just trying to mind a curriculum. They weren't just trying to check boxes, which a lot of people nowadays do. What they were doing is they were really looking at the strengths and weaknesses of a child. Where a child needed a little more help, they would spend the time and develop that child. Where a child had some skills, they would spend time and like give them opportunity to develop those skills. I still remember building like a toothpick bridge, right, where you have to have a brick, and I mean, and it was a group of 4 of us after school that we'd spend an hour after school and work on this little, you know, engineering style projects. And I learned a ton from that, because it's harder than it looks to use toothpicks to hold a brick.
Right.
And so fast forward, like what I do now is now I run an insurance company in Boston. And I run an insurance company in Boston because I lived in a historic building in Boston, and I was fascinated by the architecture, and I was like, this is amazing. This is just crazy and beautiful, and I just wanted to learn more. And then I started working with this company that specialized in historic homes in Boston, like the historic brick homes in Boston. And all of it really can be traced back to Appleton. All of it can be traced back to afternoon announcements. I'll just share one other story, which is really interesting, because we also went hiking with Mrs. Meservey and looked at lichens and looked at, now I don't know if you remember this, but our hike ended in a police search Because we went, so we were at the new school, and we went to the field, and there's some trails. If you keep going back, I think actually it ends up
Up to
coming
the
up.
ridge, yeah.
Yeah, it goes up into the fields. So Heather and Robin, I think, were the two that got lost in our class. And I don't know how they veered off the path, but I mean, it was dark when they finally found them. And we were a small class, we weren't that big, but we're going through this path, and I don't know what happened, but I know that the police or the fire were called in to find them, and they finally found them. But we went home, and they hadn't found them at that time.
Did they ever find them?
Mhm, they did,
Oh.
they eventually found them.
They're not still out there.
Yeah, but anyway, I am so proud of this town, and I'm happy to be part of this.
Well, we're proud of the boy that came out of this town.
Well, Lorna and I, and Marie might have sat in that little chair behind you. Remember those little chairs?
Oh, yes.
Kindergarten,
Oh,
yeah.
yes.
And I do remember that every day started with the Lord's Prayer, the flag salute, and singing My Country 'Tis of Thee.
That is
For
correct.
at least 8 years, every day started that way, yeah. And I was thinking, one of my memories is this house right across the river where Gene Edwards lives. Down below, Roland Edgecombe used to have a slaughter shop.
I did.
And when we were in the grammar school, me and a bunch of guys, Dougie and Daryl and Lee, we were going before school, we'd hang out there and watch Roland do his thing. And we were running over at recess time and noontime to watch him.
All of the animals.
And
Anatomy 101.
Ethel Edgecombe was sitting, she'd sit there the whole time while Roland did and then finally it got a little bit, I won't go into detail, but it got a little too
Graphic?
and we all ran out of there, never went back. But that was our recreation at recess and noon, was going over the slaughter shop. Teachers didn't care, I think, would it have been Esther Moody or Mr. Merriam, yeah. Yeah, and then one other fond memory. The juniors always, Riverside Hall was across the street, and the juniors always decorated the hall for the seniors. So we were up there decorating, there's me and Lonnie and Kenny Starbridge, and I don't know who else, decorating for Elliot's class, the last class.
The last class for graduation, okay.
I don't know what went on, but Kenny was a big boy. Kenny Starbridge was a big boy. He ended up holding Lonnie Griffin by his ankles out the second floor window.
I remember.
And Mr. Merriam, the principal, looked out the window and saw Kenny Starbridge holding Lonnie Griffin by his ankles out the second floor. And he came running down. I never seen him run so fast. He didn't drop him, he put him back. But it's just one of those funny things that you remember. Yeah. So,
I was from Burkittville. I remember the Bellows School that was still living, up when I went
that was in
growing
Fishtown?
up. Go
Fishtown?
to Fishtown. I remember the Collinstown School, because that was still framed up when I was growing up. And I went to Burkittville Grade School. And we had, Chester Pease had left a scholarship fund to take care of Burkittville schools. I don't believe it cost Appleton too much money for Burkittville School, because he left all of his money to that to support the school. And I remember in 1959 or 58, something like that, I was probably 10 years old. And I remember the school board hired me to clean the schoolhouse. Can you imagine $3 I think I got to clean the schoolhouse? But we didn't have running water. We had a crock that sat in the corner. And if you wanted to have a drink, you'd make your cup out of arithmetic paper, right full of lead.
Oh, yes.
And we didn't have any flush toilets. We had back houses. We had the boys and the girls in the young room. Then we had the other two in the other room. And we had wood stoves with rounds around them, so you could go in and put your boots up around the stove and your mittens on the rounds. And we never had any playground
About when was this? 50s,
in the 50s, yeah.
mid 50s?
We didn't have any playground stuff, so when it come winter time, the boys would make a big snowball, then they'd go down to Malcolm and Frankie's mill and get a big slab, bring it up, so they'd make a teeter-totter for us, the teeter-totter.
Snowball,
Yeah.
yeah.
And we had kindergarten through third grade in one room, and then we had fourth through the eighth in the other room. We only had 2 teachers, we didn't have any janitors. One of the boys would have to go early to school to start the fires, and somebody'd have to go get a pail of water for each room.
Was Beverly Meserve one of the teachers?
Who?
Beverly Moody?
At the last of it, she
Beverly
was,
was
yeah.
taught out there, because then
Yeah.
she came over here.
I took care of Beverly before she passed, so. And I don't know, we had, Beverly Moody was the last one to teach out to Burkittville, but Miss Fuller started when I was in kindergarten, and then the next year she was Mrs. Abbott, she was married Arnold Abbott. And then we had Mrs. Nichols and Mrs. Hammond, she was there forever. She was worse than Beverly. She would take the thing that you pull the flags down with, and she'd whip us in the back of the legs with it. Black and blue was pretty bad. I remember my mother went to the superintendent, Mr. Gray, out in Searsmont, and bitched about it, so. But,
Did it do any good?
no.
No.
Still
No,
crying.
I mean, did the whip in your legs do any good?
But we made it, so. I guess,
When you came out here to high school, then, did Morris come out there with a bus? Did you have a
yes,
bus?
he
or-
charges $30 a year to ride his bus from out where I lived out to Appleton to bring us to school.
Okay, so did all of Burkittville have to meet at one location out there to
No,
ride the
he
bus?
come up because Malcolm Stack was a selectman at the time, so he come up past our house and picked us up.
Oh, okay, okay,
But outside of that, we always had to walk back and forth to school.
right, right.
I remember in kindergarten, because Vaughn and I went to school together in the same class, and we walked home and he got off up to his house and he hollered, Linda, Linda. And I looked and he was running, I mean, he was about that tall, about that fat.
Yeah.
He was running down across the field. My mother's not home. Well, his mother was my mother's sister, so she was over the house making donuts, I guess, and Vaughn gave her hell when he got, when you leave me home alone for? You know, he was just a little guy, but
Yeah.
he got over it.
I have a question for you, Appleton folk. My dad went to school over to Searsmont, and you were talking about the stove, heating the room with the wood stove. He said every once in a while, the kids would want a day of no school. And so they would come in and they would tromp in unison on the floor. And the pipe went from the front of the room where the stove was down the ceiling to the back of the room, hung in wires. And so as they came along, they would tromp in unison, and that pipe would start bouncing like this, and all of a sudden it would fall on the floor. Did any of your guys do that?
It's good teamwork.
No school until I get it all cleared up.
Janice mentioned Mr. McDonald, and that same time we had Mr. Merriam. Mr. Merriam was quite tall, and Mr. McDonald was quite
Quite
short.
short.
So Bob Stark and I had nicknames for him, Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Speaking about stoves, when we played basketball, when we went to Liberty, they had a wood stove in the corner of the floor that we were playing basketball. And in our hall over here, we had pipes come across, so when you was taking a foul shot, you either duck down to shoot or stand back
That's right.
and shoot over it. But the first big school we had, big floor to play on was the Quonset hut in Rockport.
Oh,
Yes.
Right across from where Route 90 comes out there now. And then Union built their school shortly after that, the big school.
And we used to get out of breath playing on those big floors
Yeah,
because we weren't used to it because of the community building that we had right across the street. You know, I mean, it was like a little cracker box.
I came across this picture of some kind of an event. social event in a hall, and I looked, and there's the bar going across the,
Oh,
and I
wow.
looked at the floor.
Yeah.
And I took it down to Elliot Mitchell. I said, Elliot, where's that? And he took one look at the yellow pine floor. He said that was upstairs in the community hall.
Uh-huh, yeah.
See the floor, look at the floor, Janice.
And the great thing about going to Appleton School
And the
was,
rod across the top.
In which we all got a piece of that floor.
yeah, I've got a piece. Yeah.
I have one at home.
Could you match it up? Match it up? That would be really
It's
proof.
only this big.
That would be proof right there.
Now, the great thing about going to Appleton School, there were so few of us. I remember that it was less than 50 when I was going
Yeah,
through high
for-
school there. I think
45.
like 48 of us from freshman to senior. Was that you got to play all the sports. You know, you didn't have to choose because, and that's when the boys and girls basketball teams played on the same night. So we'd entertain, maybe Liberty would come and play. We'd be playing against Liberty. The girls would play first. Okay, we would play basketball first. Then, well, us girls would run down and run up to the school, go down in the bathroom, change into cheering outfits, put our cheering outfits, no showers. So we took lots of powder and good smelling, deodorant and stuff. Run back down over the hill.
And you only played half court. Girls
And we only
half
played
court.
half court, yeah. Well, that was to save our energy, so we could cheer the boys. So we played first, then we'd go put on our cheering outfits, then we'd go back down the hill and we'd cheer for the guys, and they would play. But we got to, we played volleyball, softball, basketball. But that's
all it was then.
that's all we had then. But there was some track and
Yeah.
the,
When did that?
Gene, do you have any memories for us that you want to tell us?
yes.
You'd be embarrassed.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no.
The pictures in the 53 yearbook on the basketball team.
Who was
I've got something I wrote, if anyone wants.
Yes.
And
Marie, you must have something to.
I only went to school here through the 4th grade, but my father graduated from Appleton in 1942, I think. And I used to go to the Appleton alumni all the time with my father because my mother worked nights and he wanted to take his best daughter out of 5. And so I came with him for years and years and years. And then he passed away, Freeman Gushy. And I was devastated, not only devastated because I lost my dad, because I loved him, but I couldn't go to the Appleton alumni anymore. So Lynette Gushy, my cousin, was the secretary at the time. And she said, well, you can still come, it's no problem. So I said, okay, I'll come. That year I got voted in as secretary. Now, I said something was wrong because I came with my father, I didn't pay any dues. I got to eat free because he paid for it, and I didn't have to work. And all of a sudden I'm secretary and I got to pay dues. A whole shebang. It was like, but I had written something talking about schools, and see if I can find it. I'm just going through all these pictures today. Okay. This was at our 50th, it was 50 years, 1967, so it was the class of 67 that had their 50th, and that's the year I graduated from Belfast because I moved out of this town. Since 50 years ago, where have they gone? We ponder, we wonder, we question, how did the years pass without even realizing it? I remember so well my kindergarten class and my graduation day, and yet the years in between went by like a flash. Though my years in Appleton did not last, I loved it as the best of my past. My first day of school, I was excited as could be. I was going finally like others before me. I walked to school down the hill. I lived up on the hill going up Appleton Ridge. And across the bridge, where I would make memories that would always stay with me. It is strange the things I remember the best as my first day of school came and went. I will always remember Mrs. Missouri always looking elegant each day. She smelled of sweet roses from the perfume she so sweetly applied, and her bit of rouge on her cheeks made her look even more beautiful in a kid's bright eyes. I remember the hot lunches and the butter melted on the bread from being put in the oven and toasted perfectly with the rest. I remember basketball games in what I believed then was the biggest hall in the entire world. Graduations were held in this wonderful hall that was decorated with crepe paper and flowers so beautifully done. Every minute of special memories was nothing but fun. I remember having a wild crush on a handsome guy a little older than me. I do not want anyone to tell him because he's my cousin, you see. I
thought you were gonna say me.
I remember so well one night at a basketball game, he sat on the stage watching the girls play. He had on a plaid shirt that I'll never forget as I came up behind him and put my arms around him only to have him turn around, and to my dismay, it was not Janice I was hugging, but Kendall Moody himself. I ran off the stage, embarrassed to know that Janice and Kendall had on the same bright plaid shirt. That night I learned a lesson. Indeed, always look at who you hug from the front, and there will never be any need to run. I think of the swings and the teeter-totter that went to the sky and no type of protection on the ground in case of a fall. How do we survive? I remember stealing hats off the guys from whom you might think cute and having them chase you, and lucky, he might like you. I remember watching the high school girls and boys going up the stairs. This is one of my favorite memories. Going up the stairs to another world, it seemed. I wondered as a child what it would be like to climb those same stairs. It never did happen because our family moved away when I was only 9. But I had a large and great family that kept me connected to this wonderful town. I cannot forget the Appleton School because it was the beginning of my education. I will always say it was the best school with the best teachers. It will always hold the best memories a person could ever want. It makes me very... Thank you, class of 1967, for starting with me. Though we graduated or attended different high schools, and over the years we have drifted apart, I will conclude that we will always be together, and for this I have always held you deep in my heart.
Wow.
That was
Oh, that's great.
my 1967.
I'll share a couple of things,
Yes.
because I was only six and a half when I left Appleton. I grew up above the store, right here on the corner, which is now pretty much in bad shape. My parents were Walter and Margaret Sproul, and my Grammy was a school teacher here, Elizabeth Sproul. And Grampy, they lived where Terry and Claire Mitchell do, right there by the store. I ran away. You did too? School. And I banged on that big door, and there were big steps, as I remember. And I banged on that door, and I want to go to school. I want to go to school. And finally, I don't know who came out, but boy, oh boy, my mother wasn't far after that. She came across the bridge and got me and took me home and said, "You wait till your father comes home."
How old were you?
I hated that.
How old were you?
Well, I wasn't even going to school, so
Oh.
it wasn't kindergarten.
Right.
I thought you were like
Oh,
8
we
years
ran
old and they
around.
were hiding you in the closet.
We ran around this corner, Appleton corner. I mean, we slid from above the Gushy's house right
All the way
down
down
through
the road.
over the bridge.
Ran
I
in the
remember
Merton
that.
store to stop.
I can remember more memories in Appleton than after I moved to Hope, where I still live. And I never have understood that. I mean, the older kids, we would always follow the older kids, Lana and
Oh,
I.
yes.
We were not supposed to be with them, but we
No.
always was tagging along. We'd go down the riverbanks with them. There was a special place down here, Spring, some kind of a spring down on the bank.
Yeah, right down here, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
we weren't supposed to be down there.
No.
But as far as school, my brother Artie Sproul and Wayne Libby and Mickey Libby and Betty Sproul all went to Appleton and graduated from Appleton. And my father, my recollections of the slaughter shop, I had to be there because Dad wanted us there to, when he bought in, my father, I don't know that he owned it, I always thought he owned it after Edgecombe, but I don't know. He
Before.
worked there
When-
all the
when
time.
Before, it would have been before.
Would have been before?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, he wanted us down there, like if he had pigs come in, you know, we'd hurdle them out until he could rise them and
Yeah.
And, you know, we watched that when we were that little, and blood, oh my God. But anyway, when you said that, I thought, oh my God. My sister and I would always had to be down there, either dragging him home, dragging our father home or whatever. But anyway, the other memory I have of the school was, of course, Mrs. Meserve, who was wonderful, as I remember. But with the swings,
Yeah.
the long, wonderful swings that you'd go way out over the banking, and the banking was right there. I mean, I don't know how, you know.
We did not fall in out
didn't
over it,
fall
yeah.
down. I mean, it was quite a banking, as I remember, but I always have had such a love of swinging because of those swings. And the teeter-totter too, I remember the teeter-totter. Well, that was about all we had for playground,
It was.
yeah.
But we
and
played,
then we'd run up through to the cemetery. when
I
were
remember
in
we
school.
had those alder bushes out behind the school that we were allowed to run through there, and we would make teams of cowboys and Indians.
Yes,
And one person would be the leader, and you always felt so great, you know, if you were chosen to be the leader of the cowboys or the Indians, you didn't care, as long as you were the leader. And I remember once I was the leader, and I thought I was the cat's meow, because I was leading the boys, so.
and I remember at school, I'm quite sure this must have had to do with school, we'd sell seeds and
Yes.
cloverine salve in those little black cans. And I remember, probably was you, Lorna, maybe it was Mickey, but we would walk all the way up to Burke's mansion selling that salve and wildflower seeds. You don't remember?
I remember
doing
the
that?
packet, we get the boxes of seeds.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I don't
And
remember
then
the salve.
Cardboard thing of,
Yeah, I
I
remember the
think
seeds,
that had
we
to
sell
do with
seeds, yeah.
And that was always a great lesson of selling things when you're in school.
yeah.
Because you had to go around and you had to sell yourself, you know, for people to buy. And of course, you know, back in the day, I mean, they saw these kids come to their door and they always were very generous, you know, for buying things and stuff like that. But I remember to earn money, there were so few things you could do. Rake blueberries,
Yeah.
that was the one
Yes.
thing you could do. But I sold grit. Remember the grit?
Yeah.
Okay, and on Saturdays, I would walk from Appleton Village way up on Appleton Ridge. I think I went up as far as Lucy Derrick's on the ridge and came back down, and I would walk down to Max Wendland's and then through the village and sell the grit. And that gave me,
We always had the grit growing up in the 50s. I remember that my mother
Yeah.
always bought that.
but like Scott said, you know, it taught you
Work ethic.
work ethic, you know, and I had to keep track of the money, and I mean, I thought I was rich making money off that. I think I made 3 cents a grit. But if I sold enough, it added up, so I could buy my own clothes and not wear my sister's hand-me-downs.
We would always play baseball and softball every recess. You know, you were allowed to do that then.
Yeah.
I don't think you are now. too dangerous.
We used to have snowball fights in the field too.
Yes, we did.
Organized snowball fights,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, and this doesn't have anything to do with the school, but to show you how things have changed. I bought my first gun when I was 11. And one day, Danny McIntosh and I were walking back from hunting. We were up here to Gushie's Corner, and two wardens came along. And where are you guys headed? We're headed home. Where are your parents? Out hunting somewhere, I guess. You know. Well, where have you been? We'd been up over the ridge and way down to Pattengill Stream hunting around Count's Island. How many 11-year-old kids do that today?
That's right, that's right.
You know, it was just normal then,
Mm.
for me. Not everyone, I guess.
There were two other things that this reminded me of, two other things I'll share. Good or bad, I don't know. I think, I don't know. You definitely get in trouble for all of it now, but definitely had an effect on me. Mr. Level was a teacher, I think in 6th or 7th grade, but also like a science teacher here. And we had, her name was Jenny something, but she had, what's the slaughterhouse out in Burkittville?
Huh?
Leonard,
Okay.
Craig Leonard, it was Craig
Okay.
Leonard's,
Craig
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
So if they had a stillborn calf or something, they would bring in like the fetus, right, and we would dissect it, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, in class. And there's nothing more educational. Again, like when you're little, you're not really freaked out by it. You're more curious about it.
Right,
But I remember dissecting an eyeball and like understanding like the lens and like stuff that there's no amount of like YouTube or books or anything, like holding the lens on the tip of my finger. I still have that memory, 30 something years later.
It would be high school definitely now before you got to probably high school.
Well, you know what was pathetic
Yeah.
is when we went to high school, you know, I think we did frogs in high school, right?
Yes.
And it smelled like formaldehyde, and it was disgusting. It was terrible, and they have a little, you know, foam tray, and you had the little
Yeah.
push pins. I was like, wait, we did this like 10 years ago in Appleton, like, and it was much more authentic, and it was, you know, it's very much what Appleton is, like use the resources you have
That you
and
have.
use them completely, right? And so don't let anything go to waste. And it wasn't letting anything go to waste. And it's just a great memory that has stuck with me forever, but I'd forgotten about it. And the other one, but you probably couldn't do that nowadays. You'd probably get in big trouble for disease and all this other stuff that you might, you know, bring into the school, track into the school. The other great memory I have, and I think I had all of those bus drivers. I definitely had Mrs. Moody as well. I was one of the lucky ones because she really liked me.
She liked you, she
And-
liked you, she didn't.
She didn't like my sister, but she did like me, so it worked out really.
She likes me.
She liked
She
Katie
likes
and I,
Sarah.
yeah. But Sarah, or the sister between us, like, was always a little difficult, so she didn't like, but anyway, Mrs. Moody was great to us. But also there was, a bus driver, Dale, what was Dale?
Griffin.
Okay.
Griffin.
So he started, I don't remember whose route he replaced, but I had been in school with a different bus driver than he started driving. And he would let the children, if you were the chosen one for the day, he would let you run the lights, yellow lights and red lights. And so in a school bus, you've got like the seat, right? And you got the door right here, right? But there's a little triangle where all the buttons are, right?
Yes.
And there was like they were green inside. There's a little triangle that a small child, like a 3rd, 4th, 5th grader could fit and sit. Not buckled, not like, you know, again, nowadays you'd never do this, but you'd be like, okay, yellow lights, red lights. It was the most amazing privilege if you got to be the child that got to do that. And again, like those kinds of experiences, the problem, I love technology, I love where we are in the world in some days, but when you lose that, you know, when you lose those special experiences, you end up with somebody that maybe academically is really capable, but in reality is not capable of changing a tire or capable of like
Okay.
finding the light switch,
Yeah,
like
okay.
the basics, right?
Or feeling the joy of those little accomplishments. You take it all
Yeah.
for granted because it's all so electronic now and everybody
You're-
can do everything. You don't
You're
feel
right.
those little joys.
Which is probably psychologically really good for you. Like you're building all these little achievements, these successes, and yeah. And now if you don't have 1 million views on YouTube, you're nobody, right? but
Self-esteem is,
I just love turning the yellow and red lights on.
That's right.
I was happy with that.
Doesn't
So
get any
but
better.
those two memories come to mind. Really happy memories.
your brother, cousin David used to drive the school bus, didn't he, till he got in trouble for speeding?
Yeah. His father, which would be your grandfather, he was the janitor up here, but he never did it. David and Donnie Demons would always take care of the janitorial work up here and keep the furnace full of coal. But one night, for some reason, David and Donnie took off and forgot the coal. They come back around 3 o'clock after they thought of it, but the pipes were all frozen up. But there was a bunch of town people already here thawing out the pipes. I don't know who, he doesn't know who let them know, but, you know, anything happened, the town showed up. And David used to take the garbage out, all the papers and stuff, and there was a 50-gallon drum up back there. And one day he lit it and it was windy and the fire got away. And he said everybody showed up with brooms and whatever and put the fire out before it got up into the cemetery.
Well, there was always one telephone in the school. Whenever there was a fire, they would call the school, and the guys would go to the fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. And David, she said David got in trouble. He drove a school bus for his father too. And he never would speed when he had kids in the vehicle. But he'd go like hell on the way back to pick up more. So many parents saw him speeding that they lost that contract.
Yeah, my grandfather I used to get a thrill out of riding in his bus, which was a open van with wooden benches out around. So I used to ride, I just lived up
Was
over the
that
hill, but
That was probably the
I
Willis,
always had to ride on that bus.
Willis wagon type thing.
Yeah.
David and I had taken that Willis to Camden one night to see a couple of girls. They had a 55 Chevy, I remember the girls. When we decided it was time to come home, we come up 105, coming down toward Bald Bridge there, and this car come up so close. And that Willis, I had to get way up to look down to even see the grill on it. So I just could see it was a 55 Chevy. So I said, oh, it's the girls, I guess. So David stepped on it, but it was the Camden cops.
I remember one teacher that we had come in, Mr. Hassenfuss, when we were in high school. He had a lot of great ideas, as far as, well, he, again, like Scott said, a lot of the teachers would see the potential in the student, and they would kind of think of ways that that student could do things, you know, to bring out that potential, and so he came up with the idea of having a variety show for our high school, a way to earn money. And because all of us, you know, everybody had a part and things like that. But I just recall we had never done anything like that, had we, Donald?
No, I
And
remember the
he
variety
really,
shows, yeah.
I mean, and so that became an annual thing. We put on this big variety show up, you know, upstairs in the community building, and we'd all perform on stage, whether it was skits or singing or whatever. The guys would dress up like girls and do a song, and they'd do like the
Appleton
can-can.
Rockettes, the Appleton
Rockettes.
Rockettes.
That's right. But it was just a wonderful thing, and as a result of that, we became, a lot of the students took part in the one-act play contest that we used to have among all the schools around the area, you know, Warren, Rockport, Camden, and we used to compete against other schools. And I remember Appleton went on and we won the states one year for our performance, the one act play that we put on. But again, it all traced back to the teachers who, you know, would get us involved in these things and give us a chance to, you know, perform on stage or just present ourselves. And that was just, it was a great thing to have teachers that invested so much, you know, in us.
Well, I think we might have run our time limit.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what time it is it 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock?
8:16.
Well, that's right on.
There's some
I didn't-
over here.
Back in the 1960s, the Appleton Community Club put on a minstrel show right over here.
Oh, I was a pickaninny.
Yeah.
Way back when I was 3 years old.
Can't do that.
Not 1960s.
But that was in the
No,
60s.
no, there was a minstrel show over here in the
Yes, I
1960s.
remember it. I
Yeah.
remember that.
Some very
There'll be no more of that.
No.
esteemed citizens in Appleton were in it too. We won't mention any names.
No, no.
You know, when that hall was built,